name is Okechukwu Joshua Otazi, friends, and I'm going to be continuing where I stopped the last time as it relates to sum ifs. And the last time we met, friends, we were talking about the sum ifs formula, and I showed you how the sum if formula works. Then I gave you a little hint of how we use the sum if formula to. I showed you the difference between the sum ifs formula and then the count ifs formula, and how that the difference is just the sum range. Right. So, friends, at this juncture right now, we are going to go into a more advanced application of the sum ifs formula. If you already know the count ifs formula, I already showed you that the sum ifs formula is going to be a walkover for you. All right, so at this juncture, friends, let me just quickly double tap on this cell, and then we're going to start answering these questions. Now, the first question over here we have is asking us how much revenue was generated from Montana sold by the following segments. In other words, a particular product called Montana was sold through each and every one of these segments, and then how much revenue was generated by each of the segments. So I'm just going to double tap on this cell and say equals to count ifs. All right, and then I open up my not count ifs right now, we are talking of sum ifs. All right, so I'm going to say sum ifs, open up my, don't mind me, I'm already I'm still hooked up to count ifs. So I'm going to say sum ifs right now, and at this section where I have sum ifs, friends, I just need to specify my sum if formula. All right, so it's quite easy the way we use the sum ifs formula over here. I need to first specify my sum range. All right, so I'm going to have to specify my sum range, and the way I do this is I just go to data section. Of course, my sum range has to be the revenue section, so I just click on this particular cell over here, hold down my Control and Shift key, and press my down arrow key. Then I have to lock this J2 to J701, holding my function key and pressing F4. And I put a comma sign. Then the next thing I need to do right now is to specify my criteria range 1. Right, the criteria range 1 has to be the product. Right, so I come over to data section, and I highlight everything I have on the product. Right, so I Control Shift down arrow key on the product column. So I just highlight this with my function key, press F4 to lock it up. All right, so the next thing I need to do right now is to click on the particular criteria. All right, so what I have to do right now is to highlight C5 and lock the entire cell. Hold my function key, press F4. Right, now I can lock. I've been able to successfully lock the entire cell. Now the reason why I have to lock this is so that my formula will operate effectively. If I don't lock this, I'm not going to be getting the right answers as I drag down to the other segments. All right, so the next thing I need to do now is put a comma sign. Then I have to specify the other criteria range 2, which is the segment. So I come over to datasets, and I go to the column where I have segments, which is the first column, and I just highlight everything over there, all the columns. Control Shift down arrow key, and then I just lock that particular column, holding my function key, press F4 on my keyboard. All right, so that's how I lock that. All right, so the next thing I need to do right now is specify the criteria range 2, which is, I'm just going to click on this particular cell over here, and then close my formula, and then I'm going to click on enter. All right, so at this juncture right now, you can see, friends, we're having the right value. So if I drag down to the end, I'm going to be getting the right answers for each and every one of these segments. All right, so that's the importance of locking this particular cell over here. If I didn't lock this and I just drag down, I'm going to be getting zeros for these other sections. All right, so that's just basically what I wanted you to know. All right, so friends, the next thing I need to do right now is answer the next question, which is asking me how much revenue was generated from Montana sold by the following segments through the online sales channels. Now we are adding one more criteria to this, right? And that criteria is online sales channels. That's the other criteria. So how much revenue was generated from the sales of Montana through the various segments, given that they sold the product through an online sales channels. All right, so we have other criteria has been specified. Essentially, I think about 3 criteria right now and 1 sum range. So this is the sum range. These are the 3 other criteria. Right, so at this juncture, I'm just going to double tap inside here and say equals to sum ifs, and then I'm going to open up my brackets. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is specify my sum range, which is asking me for. So I have to come over to the section where I have total revenue. I just click on this, Control Shift down arrow key. Okay, sorry. Control Shift down arrow key, and then I have to lock this, holding my function key, I press F4. All right, so I put my comma sign. Now we are done with the summary. Now the first thing is the first criteria. So the first criteria will have to be the Montana product. So I'm going to go to the product section and highlight everything we have in the product segment, product column. So this is the product column. I just hold my Control and Shift key, then I press my down arrow key. All right, so I'm just going to lock everything over there, hold my function key and press F4. Right, then I put a comma sign. Then my criteria 1 is going to be this particular product. Right, so at this juncture right now, I've been able to deal with the first criteria. So the next thing is the criteria range 2. Right, so the criteria range 2 right now, I need to just come over. Now, just before I specify the criteria range 2, let me have you know this. Now, you must be careful with the cell locking over here, otherwise you're going to fail in all the formulas. Right, as you can see over here, we have just one product, which is Montana. Right, so I have to lock this entire cell, holding my function key and pressing F4. Function key and press F4 to lock the entire cell. Right, because we just have one product. We don't want it to shift. We don't have other products. Right, in this case where we have segments, we have multiple segments, so I don't need to lock anything. Right, because I want the segments to shift. Right, but here we just have one product, so I have to lock the entire cell so that it continues to make reference to that one product. Right, so the next condition is going to be the segments. Let me quickly show you how we do this. I come over to this data section, and I'm going to go to the segment colon, which is the first column. I just hold my control and shift key and press my down arrow key, friends. And then what I'm going to do right now is just to lock this, holding my function key and then pressing F4. And then that's how I've been able to specify the segment. And I just put a comma sign over here. Then the criteria 2, right? I've been able to specify the criteria range, but then the criteria 2 is what I have to click on. So I'm just going to click on this particular cell over here. And now I don't need to lock anything because I want this formula to shift. Right now it is B16, right? B16, but some other time it will be B17 as I drag down the formula. And some other time it will be B18. So I can't lock it. If I lock it, it's going to continuously make reference to only B16, right? Not B17. It's not going to shift, right? So I don't need to lock anything over here. I will not lock the cell. I will allow the cell to change, to shift, right? So that's basically what I'm doing. So I put my comma sign over here. Then lastly, I have to specify one more criteria range, right, which is the online sales channels. So I come back to my data set and then go to the section where we have sales channels. And I just click on this Control Shift down arrow key, and I have to lock this again, function F4, and I put my comma sign, and then I have to specify the criteria 3. All right, so I just click on the section where I see online. All right, so at this juncture right now, I still have to lock the entire cell because we have just one sales channel specified to us. We don't have multiple sales channels, so we want it to keep making reference to sales channels. All right, that sales channels, which is online sales channels. All right, so let me quickly explain what I mean over here in this formula before clicking enter. All right, so I want it to keep, for example, in this case we have the government sales channels making reference to Montana and online sales channels. Then it's going to give me a value over here. In this case we have mid-market still making reference to Montana and online sales channels, and it's going to give me the total revenue here. Now you can notice that this is changing. The red line, the red bar is changing, but this is not expected to change, right? And online sales channels is also not expected to change, and that's why I had to lock the online sales channels and lock Montana, but I didn't lock this particular section because at some point it's going to change to mid-market and change to channels partner and change to enterprise and then change to small businesses. And so if I had locked it, I'm going to just be making reference to only this government segment, but we have multiple other segments here, and that's why I don't have to lock it. I have to lock the online sales channels because we have just one online sales channels, and I have to lock the product because we have just one product specified. If we had just one segment specified, maybe I could have locked it and then it would have made more sense. All right, so at this juncture we don't have one segment specified, and so I have no reason to lock it. So I just click on enter here, and now you can see I have the right answers. Now just to show you what I mean over here, now in this section where we have the segment, let me quickly show you something. In this section where we have the segment, right? So I think the segment is over here, and I didn't lock it, B16, right? You're going to see what happens as I drag down my formula. As I drag down to the end, right, you will see that it changes. At this point it changes to B17. What was happening? It changes to B18, changes to B19, changes to B20. Right, so this is the only section that is allowed to vary, the segment section, but every other section, every other data in my entire cell does not change. All right, in my entire formula does not change. Every other formula, every other value doesn't change. All right, so friends, that's basically how we use the sum ifs, and we are going to get into something a little bit even more advanced as we delve more into the tutorial. Now the third question is asking us how much revenue was generated from Montana sold by the following segments through the online sales channels if the unit sold is greater than or equal to 2000. Now we are adding one more criteria again, right? So it can go on and on and on and on. You can specify even up to 10 criteria, 5 criteria, and you can just keep going on and on. All right, so it's not different from what we've done over here. Basically, it's just that we have to add one more criteria. All right, so it's basically the same thing as what we've done over here. So what I'm going to do over here, friends, is I'm just going to copy this formula. All right, I want to be a little bit lazy, don't mind me. It's basically the same thing, so I'm just going to copy this formula, Control C. Okay, let's not be lazy at this juncture, and let me type in the formula again so that you get to understand it better. All right, but if I had copied the formula and placed it over here, I just need to specify a comma sign and then put this other criteria, and I will still get the same answer. All right, so that's basically just it. All right, so at this juncture right now, let me start afresh and type my formula. I'm just going to say equals to sum ifs, and I'm going to just open up my brackets. All right, so at this juncture, friends, I need to specify my sum range, which is the revenue section. All right, so I just come over to my data, and then I come over to where I see revenue, Control Shift down arrow key. I'm going to be a little bit fast with this. I just have to lock this function F4, then I put my comma sign. Criteria range 1 is has to be the product called Montana, so I have to specify the product colon, Control Shift down arrow key. All right, and then I have to lock this holding function key, and then press F4. That's how I lock it, and then I have to specify the criteria, which is just this over here. So what I have to do right now is to lock this, hold my function key, press F4. All right, so I have to put a comma sign. All right, then I have been able to specify my first criteria range and criteria. So the next is the second criteria range, which is going to be let's make segment. All right, so I just come over to my data set, and then I have to come over to this segment section and Control Shift down arrow key. I just lock this. All right, it's quite easy. All right, if you already knew what we did in the previous one. All right, so at this juncture I have to just come over to the section where I see a particular segment. I just click on this first segment, and I don't need to lock anything because I expect the formula to shift as I move down the formula. All right, so I just leave that and put my comma sign, and then the next thing is the third criteria. All right, so I need to just look at it. The criteria is the online sales channels. So I come back to my data set, come over to sales channels, highlight the entire column. All right, and I'm just going to highlight this, hold my function key, and press F4. All right, so sometimes you may have already created named ranges for your data set, and in that case this whole thing don't need to be tedious. You don't need to come back to data and come to advanced sum ifs and come to data. That's where named ranges become very important. What I like to do when working with such data is I basically like to create a named range. So in that case, I can just call the named range in my formula and just insert it, and automatically I say highlight it. It makes your work a little bit faster. All right, so that's just to let you know, just so you know that. All right, so we'll continue with my formula. The next thing I need to specify is the criteria 3. All right, so this is the criteria 3, which is the online sales channel. All right, so I just click on that, and then I have to completely lock the cell. All right, so that's the third criteria. Now we have one more criteria given to us, which is the fourth criteria. Right, so the fourth criteria right now is asking us if the unit sold is greater than or equal to 2000. So I come over to my data set and look for unit sold. Unit sold over here, Control Shift down arrow key, right, and then I have to lock this, holding my function key, and press F4. Right, then the next thing I need to do, friends, is to specify the fourth criteria. Now I need to put a quotation mark. Now it's asking me the question. If you read the question very well, it's asking me greater than or equal to 2000 if the unit sold is greater than or equal to. So greater than or equal to 2000. All right, so close my quotation, close my brackets, and click on enter. All right, so friends, that's basically how we can get the formula. This is the entire formula we specified. All right, so this is how we can get our value. If I just come to the bottom right and drag to the end, I'm going to be getting the right values over here in Excel. All right, so friends, the next thing, without wasting much time on that, I'm going to be talking about some other question. All right, so the next question is asking us how much revenue was generated by the products below. I think, okay, yeah, here we go. It says how much revenue was generated by the products below sold by the following segments. All right, so how much revenue was generated by the products that are over here that were sold through this following segment? In other words, how much revenue was generated by carretera sold by the government segment, how much revenue was generated by this same product sold by the mid-market segment, how much revenue was generated by this same product sold by the channels partners. Right, so and it goes on and on and on and on. All right, so at this juncture, friends, I'm just going to increase my screen brightness so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so at this juncture, friends, we've been asked to fill up this entire table. All right, so we have to be a little bit fast with this. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to tap in this cell. It's nothing short of what you already know in the counties formula. All right, so I'm going to say equals to sum ifs. Right now, what I want to count is this sum range. It's similar to what we've done. I just come over here and highlight the entire column for revenue, Control Shift down arrow key, and I'm just going to lock this, holding my function, then pressing F4 on my keyboard. Let me collapse this quickly. All right, so that's basically how I'm going to specify my sum range. Right now, I put a comma sign. The first thing is going to be the criteria range 1. Right, so the next criteria range is going to be the product. All right, so I'm going to come over to my data set, look for the section where I have product, highlight the entire product column. All right, and then lock it up. All right, so then I have to click on a particular product, which is carretera product, this particular product. Right now, something I have to show you is this, and what we are working with is like a multiplication matrix. All right, so we have to be careful in using cell lock-ins if we are going to actually get the right answers. All right, so in this section, friends, you can see over here for the product column. All right, the product is arranged in a column-wise manner, but the segment in a row-wise manner. And so in the product section, we have just one column for product, but we have multiple rows. The products exist in multiple rows. In this segment section, we have multiple columns, but it exists in just one row, which is row number 35. All right, so we have to be a little bit clever in trying to specify or lock ourselves if we are going to get the right answers. So now for this formula in the product section, what I have to lock is lock B. Right, I'll have to lock the column and allow the rows to change. And to lock that column, I have to put a $sign at the back of B. In other words, I just come to the back of B and type in a $sign. All right, in that case, I've been able to lock the column, but the rows are allowed to change. In other words, I can move from 36 to 37 to 38 to 39 to 40 to 41. All right, but B doesn't change. That's basically what I'm saying. All right, B doesn't change. That column doesn't change. All right, so that's what I'm just doing right now. I'm using cell locking. All right, so I just put a comma sign. Now, the second criteria range I have to specify is the segment. So I come to my data set, and then I highlight the entire column for segments. Control Shift down arrow key. Then I have to just lock the entire column, holding my function key and press F4. And so I just put a comma sign. And the next thing I need to specify right now is the criteria 2. Right, the second criteria. All right, so in trying to specify the second criteria, friends, I just need to click on one of the cell over here, and I just click on this cell over here. Now in this case over here where we have the segment, now what I need to lock now is the row and not the column. In other words, I can move from column C to column D to column E to column whatever down to C, D, E, F, G. I can change the columns, but I don't want this number 35 to change, right? Because it is just one single row. So I put a $sign at the back of 35. In between C and 35, I put a $sign. All right. So in that case, I'm locking the row and not the column. So I just close my bracket and then I can press enter on my keyboard. All right. So in that case right now, if I drag my formula, I'm going to be getting the right answers. If I don't do the cell locking properly, I'm not going to get the right answers, and I'm going to be failing in my formulas. All right, so friends, as you can see over here, I've been able to successfully fill up this multiplication matrix table, and you can see over here, interpreting this data, we can see that 309,540 naira or dollar was generated from a Montana product sold through the mid-market segment. All right, so that's basically how we interpret this.